All right, everyone, welcome back to the second ever episode of the JMMA Monday podcast. We have a lot to discuss this week. We got RIZIN 37 just around the corner, and we've got a very great guest to join us this week to discuss it. We have Christopher Aguiar on this week's episode. Since April, Aguiar has been writing MMA articles for his own website, aguiarmma.com. He covers a wide variety of topics, new and old, big and small, and does it all with quite the passion. In his own words, he is, quote, stringing together words on all things MMA with a deep bias for JMMA and sometimes kickboxing. I would personally argue that he is one of the fastest rising names in the MMA writing scene. So I'm very happy we could get him on for this episode to discuss the latest topics in the JMMA scene. Welcome to the show, Christopher.
Hey, Jack. How's it going, man?
It's going great. Really an interesting week ahead in the JMMA scene, and we got a lot to discuss going into this episode. So I'm happy we could do this, and let's just start by talking about RIZIN 37, shall we?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very excited about RIZIN 37. What do you want to talk about?
So, last week on the episode, I had CJ on here, and we mainly talked about the Atomweight Grand Prix. And I want to start with that, and I just want to hear, what to you is the thing that stands out about this tournament? There's so many storylines, there's so many different things at play here in this bracket, and I want to know, when you think about it, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Yeah, I mean, right off the bat, this is an incredible tournament, and I love that Japanese MMA's kind of always been at the forefront of women's MMA and promoting women's mixed martial arts. I mean, the fact that they are wrapping this entire event, and they haven't had a big pay-per-view or a big event since where we had the 3 titles with Satoshi and had the Ayaka and the Seikeizawa fight, and we don't talk about the Ushiku and Sato fight because that was not great, but yeah, I'm super excited about this Grand Prix. I think for me the most interesting storyline, you'd be crazy not to think it's obviously Ayaka Hamasaki and Jessica Aguilar. I mean, how can it not be? The amount of history that these two have together, the fact that they were going to fight in 2011. It's crazy that they're both still fighting, 11 years later, both pioneers of women's MMA, and they've both had incredible careers. I can't wait for that fight. But I think for me, the most interesting thing might be Siwoo Park. I know it's a little bit kind of out there and maybe a little bit crazy, but I think she's going to surprise a lot of people in this tournament.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I was the other night I was listening to the We Are RIZIN podcast, just sort of skimming through it, and I was hearing a lot of people on that podcast. They were picking Park to win in this opening round against Asakura, and when you look at their records, it's hard to imagine that, and things like that. But Park is really, when you think about it, the person in this bracket that I think could play spoiler. And I don't think she could personally win the bracket, but I think early on that could be one of the more interesting things to happen, seeing how she'll do against Asakura.
Yeah, I think her aggression and her general forward pressure is going to really mess up Kana. I really like Kana, but it's, she's had 25 fights. I know she's still young, but I haven't really seen much improvements in her game. It's the usual kind of sloppy striking and then generally okay wrestling. I think Siwoo Park's really going to kind of blow her out of the water in that fight. I really think so.
Mm-hmm. And I was looking before this podcast at the lineup for the show, like the bout order, and I saw that they had Izawa in the main event, and I was really interested by that because to me it just sort of put in perspective that this tournament could be a huge deal for her. I mean, where do you think her career is right now, in the sense that she obviously is the champion of the division? That's a huge accomplishment that you can give a fighter, but how much, if you want to talk like legacy or something, how much legacy would it add on to her to win this tournament?
I mean, the fact that she's only had 6 fights and she's already beaten Ayaka Hamasaki twice is terrifying. I mean, I honestly think we're looking at a generational talent here in Seikeizawa. Have you watched by any chance the Confessions episode that went out today?
No, I haven't.
Right, yeah. She said that she wants to fight for 5 more years and then she wants to retire.
So she already has like a end date set up. Wow.
Which is crazy because she's still so young, and she wants to basically coach the next generation of Japanese fighters. And I mean, I hated hearing that because I really want to see Seikeizawa fight until, you know, as long as Ayaka has fought, for example. Yeah, but to answer your question, I think this tournament is built around her. It's built for her. We are genuinely looking at probably one of the greatest Japanese MMA talents in a very long time. And I know that sounds really hyperbolic, but you simply don't beat Ayaka Hamasaki twice the way that she did. My mind is blown at the way she fights. Her grappling is ridiculous. Her striking is quite impressive. I still think there's a bit to be worked on there. But I mean, just generally her scrambles, her kind of insistence on finishing fights. I mean, even if she's on bottom, like she's elbowing people and she's just generally doing nasty things to try and get the fight in her favor. And yeah, I mean, I think she's going to be quite special, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you said this bracket sort of built around her. I think it's funny that, like, I don't know how set in stone an atomweight tournament was a few months ago, but after she won the championship and called for a tournament, I feel like that sort of almost guaranteed it was going to happen. Like, they couldn't have just not done it after their new champion asked for the tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, they'd be crazy not to do this. And I don't know how far-fetched this is, or maybe we're looking too far into the future, but I wouldn't be surprised if Seikeizawa makes a massive kind of splash in this tournament. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of years we finally see the UFC make an atom weight class, and she might be one of the people to spearhead that. I really think the amount of buzz that she was getting outside of the JMMA community, just after she beat Ayaka the second time, I really think she's destined for special things outside of Japan as well.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder, like, if she were to win this tournament just like handily, what do you even do with her then? And it's sort of crazy to say that because a year ago Izawa wasn't really on the radar of like the title picture, right?
Yeah.
So to think that it's sort of a testament to like how small the division is, that someone like Izawa can go on this, unbelievable run, but at the same time, within such a short span of time, basically clear out a division. And I feel like that's something we could be looking at if she wins this tournament.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the only risk that she runs here is if she doesn't win the tournament. Like, I don't know what would, either way, whether she wins or loses, I don't know what's left for her in Japan. Like, I really am that high on her. I remember listening to CJ and Shu do their podcast. And I mean, CJ said it after she beat Ayaka the first time, said that she immediately just needs to go to America and try to carve out a career in the US, because already I don't think there's much left for her in Japan. This tournament would be a great kind of stepping stone for her and something that she can be like, hey, not only am I the RIZIN champ, I also beat arguably the best, atom weights or super atom weights in the world. Like, at the same time, I'm ready to kind of spearhead a division in the UFC. I know it sounds crazy, but I can genuinely see them going and making this weight class and building it around her. I would not be surprised if the UFC did something like that in the next year or two, especially because with the whole road to UFC stuff and Tatsuro Taira, I feel like they're finally starting to tap into the Japanese market, and it's a market they've neglected for a very long time. And just seeing the amount of Japanese fighters that are now training in the US, sorry. You're seeing Kleber's out there training, which is pretty cool. Kai went out there for a while to train with Marab and Aljo. I don't think he got any training in with Aljo, but I think there was a video of the two of them together, maybe. So just the fact that we're starting to see more Japanese fighters in that kind of UFC bubble, I wouldn't be surprised if Seika does what we think she's going to do in this tournament. She just goes and carves out a career for herself in the US.
Mm-hmm. And one more thing about this tournament, I'm really interested just how the landscape of the division will look in general after this, because we have names like Reina, Hamasaki, and you could even throw Asakura in the picture of, you don't really know what's next for them after this tournament if they don't win it, right? Because Kana, Asakura, those three names, it's hard to sort of picture what would be next for them after this bracket, and it wouldn't be surprised surprising to me if just out of those three names, at least one of them, this is it, this tournament.
Yeah, and I think it might be Renner.
Really?
Yeah, only because again, in the latest Confessions episode, I don't know how accurate the subtitles and the closed captioning are on Confessions, but she kind of, outright said that she's not really interested in MMA before. And I know that's been a running thing with Renner for a while, but I don't know what her motivations are going to be coming into this. I know that she doesn't want to fight Ayaka Hamasaki, and Ayaka doesn't want to fight her either. But I think if the two of them win, they're going to fight each other. I don't think RIZIN are going to keep them apart and hoping for some sort of final. But I've never seen Svetkivska fight before. I've seen highlights. I mean, she looks like someone who's coming into fights and trying to finish. I wouldn't be surprised if we get a shock result and Renner kind of bows out, and this is the last time that we see her fight in MMA.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, it's like when it comes to retirement talk, I mean, it's just a general thing in MMA that you can't buy too much into retirement talk because so many people come out of retirement. But it's hard for me sometimes to sort of like hear these quotes and give them too much because there's been so many times where I hear like Mikuru, for example, or like someone like Reina say something like, "Oh, I just want to do a few more fights till I'm out," and then a year goes by and another year goes by and they're still fighting, and it just makes you think like, okay, like what are you just saying that so that people like stay focused on what you have coming next, or but I do genuinely believe that out of the more experienced names in this bracket, one of them is going to go. I was personally thinking that this might be the last ride for Hamasaki, but I don't know, because I just personally thought like, she lost her belt, and this is her last push towards getting back into that picture, because she can't just get another match with Izawa. She can't just get that trilogy immediately. And quite honestly, in this bracket, I don't know how it works. Like, is this going to be like a Bellator-esque bracket where the belt will be on the line during it? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. And I don't think we have a bracket per se. I think RIZIN are just going to, like they usually do, okay, you won, we're going to match you up. Like
Right.
They don't usually kind of, or they haven't recently laid out an actual physical bracket, I guess. And I don't think the belt is on the line for this.
Yeah, so this tournament would be like, I guess how it would work is you would have to win the tournament and then get a title fight against Izawa is probably how it would work.
Yeah.
So for Hamasaki, I would imagine that this tournament would be her last shot towards getting a title fight. And if this tournament doesn't work out for her, or if she gets that title fight and the title fight doesn't work out for her, I would feel that would be the end for her, because I just don't personally know where you would go from there. Maybe she would also have like a retirement fight. I know some fighters get those retirement fights, and I personally like the idea of having a retirement fight as opposed to just sort of going off into the sunset abruptly one day. But yeah, I think that out of all the people here, I think she is the one who is most likely to retire after the bracket. But of course, I think it also all depends on outcome. You bring up a really interesting case for why this could be it for Reina. But overall, there's so much to think about with this tournament. It's crazy how this is only 4 fights and there's still so many storylines at play. I mean, last year we had the Bantamweight Grand Prix that was 16 fighters and started with 8 fights. And I feel like we had we have more storylines here than we had then, just to start. So yeah, that's the biggest thing that's going into RIZIN 37. But no doubt there's a whole lot of other stuff happening on this card. I wanted to ask you, not to put you on the spot or anything, but is there any other fight on this card or fights on this card that are particularly interesting to you?
Yeah. Okay. That, like, I've given this some thought, and I thought you'd ask. There's 2 fights that I'm really excited for, only because I think that they are fucking hilarious. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. Sorry. Shrek versus Sudario. I mean, it's Shrek, and I want to see Shrek win until the day he dies, basically. And the second one is obviously Yushi, just because I want to see another Yushi walkout.
Right.
But and memeing aside and jokes aside, a fighter I'm really excited to watch again is Vugar Karamov. I think Sora Yamamoto is absolutely crazy for taking that fight with Karamov. Yamamoto fought 2.5, 3 weeks ago, and he's fighting again against Karamov.
Right? Yeah.
I honestly, I don't know if this is a hot take, man, but every time I watch Karamov fight, I think he might genuinely be it. Like he might genuinely be the best male RIZIN fighter, and we just don't know it yet.
Wow.
Yeah, the guy's like super violent, and the JMMA and the RIZIN rule set just suits his game perfectly. I honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if this guy is probably the best male fighter and we just don't know it yet. And I say that as someone who loves Satoshi as well.
I find it really interesting that you say that. I think that the perception around Karamov is a little hurt in some people's opinion because of that fight he had at the Tokyo Dome last year. Loss. I think that the way that fight went and the result, for a lot of people, it made them kind of sour on him. But I think that, after a few performances, he can win back a good reputation from people. And, Yamamoto coming in on short notice to take this fight. This is a short notice fight, I think.
It is, yeah. I think he's taken it on about 2 weeks' notice, and he fought 2 weeks ago, which is crazy.
Yeah, so this is certainly an opportunity for Karamov to put on a performance that can show people that he is a big name like that. Personally, I'm not as high on him as you are, because that's you put out that is certainly a hot take. You said, I don't know if that's a hot take. It is absolutely a hot take. Yeah, so I would say that's this is going to be interesting performance from him, because we'll get to see more of how he is. And Yamamoto, even though this is short notice for him, he's on quite a roll too. So that really is an interesting matchup. I want to go back to the heavyweight bout with Hideki Shrek and Sudario. I find this interesting because I feel like it's going under the radar that this is easily the biggest fight that Sudario's had so far.
Yeah.
And not only is it because it's against a tested guy like Shrek, but it's because Shrek is on a very good run right now. He's strung together, I think it's 4 consecutive wins, and many of them have come against other RIZIN names. And Sudario, honestly, his bounce back performance from that loss last year was against deep impact talent Saint, who the differential in the talent between Sudario and Saint was very much on display, and he knocked him out in the 2nd minute. So, I just feel like this is a tough matchup for Sudario, and I don't know what's going to happen if he loses it. What do you think about this matchup and where it puts Sudario?
I joke a lot about Shrek. I don't think he's a great fighter, but he's definitely good for Japanese heavyweight standards. One thing I will say about Sudario, and the reason I am genuinely excited for this fight, the guy looks really good. Like, he looks like he's in shape, and he's been training out in the US for a while now. I mean, if you look at his Instagram, you see him with like Ngannou and like Brandon Moreno. Not that I think he's in any way sparring with someone the size of Brandon Moreno, but I think that this for Sudario is a make or break, only because it's going to show us if he is a legitimate MMA fighter and a legitimate MMA talent for, again, Japanese heavyweight MMA standards. This is a huge test for him. Shrek, it's not easy to put Shrek away, even though he's 48 years of age. The guy has insane durability. You say he's on a 4-fight win streak. He's also finished his last 4 opponents. So it's not like he's going in there and kind of laying on people and just praying for the best. He really is finishing dudes. And Sudario is now at a point where we need to see, are you a legitimate MMA fighter, or is this kind of just like a gimmick sumo wrestler kind of thing? Yeah. I'm really excited for this fight.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, in that winning streak, Shrek beat Shoma Shibisai, who is the one person who has beat Sudario. So, if you want to like MMA math your way around that, there's something to be said there, I think.
He also beat the crap out of Sudario's brother as well.
Right. Yeah. So this is like a bit of a revenge plot
It's a
here.
revenge, yeah. Although
Yeah.
they don't have the same name. I don't know if there's beef there. I remember reading some stuff that they don't get along. I don't know if I'm
Really?
stirring the pot here or maybe I'm making stuff up, but I
It seems
vaguely
like
remember reading something. Yeah,
there's no shortage of drama surrounding both those guys in
yeah,
their careers.
most
Um,
definitely.
yeah, I'm excited to see Yushi, like you said. One thing I'm really interested about is this fight that Kota Miura is having against Felipe Massoni.
Yeah,
This is, on paper, a really big test for him. And, I think that Ryzen sees Kota as this person that they can really make a star. I don't know if you've seen, but he is like insanely popular online. There are TikToks of Kota Miura that have millions of views. He has this very unbelievable amount of popularity around him. So I think that Ryzen really want him to be this guy that they can bring up to this star level. And when you have someone who's like TikTok famous, that can bring in much more younger fans. And I think that's something they probably hope to get from him.
yeah, definitely, and it helps that he's the son of one of the like most renowned Japanese footballers in the
Exactly. Yeah.
world and certainly of all time as well. I I'm very interested in this fight only because I'm going to be honest, I've never seen Felipe Massoni fight, and I've not gone out of my way to watch anything that he's done. I just by looking at his record, I mean, he hasn't won a fight in 5 years. He hasn't had a fight in 3. Again, I imagine a lot of that might be pandemic related, but I feel like this is kind of a layup for Kota Miura
Mm.
to continue to cement his name. And like you say, I mean, if he's popular on TikTok, and I mean, RIZIN are jumping all over that. Their whole thing. I mean, if you can break out a few dance moves, they'll build a whole card around you. Just look at like Kenta Takizawa, right? Like that's a great
Right.
example. I don't know if the dude has more than one dance move, but I've seen that one dance move in like 50 different like montages and tribute videos. You know?
Yeah, and just as a side note, he was going to be in a really interesting. This is Kenta Takizawa. He was going to be in a really interesting matchup against Naoki Inoue. That's not on this
Yes.
card anymore. I don't know if it was injury that took it off or anything else,
I
like COVID or
I
something.
kind of like tongue in cheek tweeted that I hate this card now because Naoki Inoue isn't fighting. Um,
Yeah,
I kind of mean it at the same time. I love Naoki Inoue. I think he's an incredible fighter. I think Kenta Takizawa would have. I think he would have been handily destroyed in that fight. That's why I was quite excited. And
mm.
correct me if I'm wrong. Were they supposed to headline, or was the plan always for Izawa to headline?
I think we didn't really know what would headline before the Grand Prix was announced,
Right. Yeah.
um, because they usually like don't really announce the belt order until like a week or so ahead of time.
Yeah.
Um, I think that, yeah, I didn't really know what the headliner was going to be, and that was sort of the weird thing. Like before the Atomweight Grand Prix was announced, I was sort of thinking like, what do you even have as the main event for this card? It didn't seem like there was a clear headliner for the show.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is sort of a bummer that that's off the card because in a way it was going to be really interesting to see him. I think that was going to be his first appearance since New Year's Eve. And Takizawa, he was coming off a surprisingly good Grand Prix run. I don't think people expected him to make it to New Year's Eve, but he
I
did.
certainly didn't. And
Yeah.
the highlight of that was the fact that he like made Yuki Motoya like jump out of the ring. Do you remember that knockout? He kind of
It
just
was,
walked. It was pretty
yeah.
weird. Yeah.
I think that yeah. So I think how it worked was he landed a left hook, and that Motoya went into the ropes after the left hook, but then also just in a fight or flight, so a response started climbing out of the ring as well,
I like that. I respect
if
that.
I remember correctly.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
also
you're describing it correctly in my head.
what was so surprising about that was that Takizawa, at least in my mind, had just been notoriously boring throughout his RIZIN
Oh
run.
yeah, that
So it was
Imanari
just,
fight was horrible.
yeah, so it was just surprising that he sparked this like really legitimate talent.
Yeah.
Um, so I would imagine that bout's actually probably a big reason why he's getting this Inoue fight, or well, he was going to get this Inoue fight.
For sure.
But enough being bitter about that canceled bout.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, so just a few more quick things. Oh yeah, this show has a match between Yuki Motoya and Shinobu Ota. I don't really
Yes.
get this. For anyone who doesn't know, Ota is the former Olympic wrestler turned MMA fighter, and he has a record of 2 wins and 1 loss. And Montoya has 40 pro fights. I feel like I don't know if I'm getting something wrong here, because I feel like I remember how Ota performs and everything. It just feels like he's being fed to the wolves here. Like, am I getting something wrong?
This is a very weird fight for Ota. I don't know what RIZIN's insistence is on kind of building him up. I don't think he's a very good fighter. Could he be in the future? Certainly. Right now, he's definitely not. He's very, very, very raw. And like you said, they're feeding him to a guy who's had 40 professional fights. And is as much as I kind of attack Montoya quite a bit online, and I don't think he's an amazing fighter, but I mean the guy's been around for ages and he's a pretty credible fighter. And I don't know what they're doing with Ota. I think that the best thing they've done with Shinobu Ota is they put him in that grappling tag team thingy that RIZIN did on like RIZIN Trigger recently. He was really fun in that. He was like, I don't know, like he grabbed, I think it was Nakamura that he grabbed and like suplexed him. That was pretty fun. But yeah, I don't know what the hell's going on with this. And it's interesting that back to back now they've given Ota two fighters who are veterans in Japanese MMA. Like he fought Kazuma Sone, who's now retired. We saw his retirement at the last RIZIN card. Kazuma Sone must have had about 50 pro fights. And yeah, again, I don't know what's going on here, man. No clue.
And I feel like the most confusing thing is like this just gives me flashbacks to when they debuted him against Hideo Tokoro, and
Yeah.
it became very clear right out the gate that Ota was just not a mixed martial artist yet. That he had the wrestling there, but then he got submitted on the ground because, well, he just didn't have that skill yet. And part of me just worries, when you match him against Montoya, are we just going to see that again? That someone who is a pure mixed martial artist just exposes him in some sort of way. I could completely be shut up here because he did score a finish win in his last fight. But I don't know, something about this. When it was announced, I froze for a second and I thought like, am I going crazy? Like this doesn't make sense.
Yeah, it really doesn't. And one thing I'll say, because I don't know if we're going to discuss it, but I kind of just want to throw it in there. Hideo Tokoro is fighting on this card. He's fighting Makoto Shinryu or Makoto Takahashi, who is one of the biggest like booming prospects in JMMA right now. Also, I think the thing that's fascinating about this, Hideo Tokoro is moving down to 125 pounds at the age of 44. He's never fought at 125 pounds. He's fought as high as 195 back in the day in K1, and is pretty much a career bantamweight / featherweight. At 44 years of age, can he even make 125 pounds? Like, this fight confuses me as well.
Yeah, I don't really understand that, and I actually didn't know about the weight thing. When I saw that fight, I saw it as a clear sort of build up fight for Makoto because he is on quite an impressive run right now between Deep and his few appearances in RIZIN.
Yeah, that ninja
So
choke he hit earlier in the year, I mean, a couple months ago,
yeah,
I think it was to win the belt, right? Because he wasn't champion at the time. And yeah, it was just insane. Like the guy's very, very good.
yeah, and I just looked at his record. He only has one RIZIN fight, so this is clearly them trying to showcase him more. I don't really know what's up with the flyweight division in RIZIN. I think that it was one of those things where the hope was that they would do, everybody knew there would be some sort of Grand Prix this year, and I think there was, out of the few divisions floating around, flyweight was certainly one of them.
Yeah, I
But
always thought it would be flyweight because that was kind of what they'd been building up to. Like when the
yeah,
bantamweight Grand Prix ended, we kept being told it would be a flyweight thing, and they signed a bunch of flyweights from different Japanese MMA organizations, and I guess it's not happening.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know if they would want to do more than one tournament at once. I would imagine this late in the year that they wouldn't be doing one this year because I don't think RIZIN would do a tournament that they don't want to end on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
And I feel like that cutoff date, we're sort of reaching it within the next month or so for it to be too late to start a tournament. that you're going to end on New Year's Eve. So yeah, I guess that's going to be a good performance from him. I hope Tokoro doesn't have much trouble making weight in that matchup. So, that's unless there's anything else you want to bring up, that's most of the RIZIN card.
I think that's pretty much it. I guess Johnny Case and Koji Takada is going to be insane, and I'm so happy that they've made that fight happen. But yeah, I just want to throw that out there because I didn't want it to go like not spoken about, I guess.
Yeah, and that's an interesting one for both of them because they're both in need of a win, both coming off losses off the same card, RIZIN 35 earlier this year. I feel like I would argue that Takeda needs the win more because he lost to Spike Carlisle, and Case lost to Satoshi, which is a very understandable loss.
For sure.
One thing before we move on from this card, I just want to ask you, what do you think about the quality of this card? Because I think over the past year, one of the biggest discussions around RIZIN is how quality are these cards? A lot of people have complained that a lot of the cards have fallen off in quality or haven't had a real good main event. I think, in my opinion, RIZIN 36 was one of those really weak ones where you looked at it, especially with Kaya Sakura being out of the main event, and you just thought, what is this really bringing to the table? So, I want to hear, what do you think about this card? And a question I asked CJ last week that I want to hear your thoughts on as well is, do you think this is Saitama level, like Saitama quality?
I really think it is, man. I love what they're doing with the Grand Prix. Like I said at the beginning of the show, no one does it better in the world than Japanese MMA when it comes to promoting female fights. I think this card is of a very high quality. I really do. I like that we've got a few prospects in here that have favorable matchups, like Makoto Shinryu's one. Again, Kota Miura, I'll say he's a prospect just for the sake of, I don't know if it's a popularity thing or if he's good. Shinobu Ota, potentially, if he beats Motoya, we could be looking at someone who is actually much better than we thought. Karamov, is fighting again. I really think this is a high quality card, and I think it's what we've, as fans of RIZIN and as fans of JMMA, it's kind of the least we deserve after the previous card and then not having anything during the match, which made total sense. I'm just happy that this seems to me like a return to form for RIZIN. I get that there's no belt on the line on the card, but just the Grand, I would tune in just the Grand Prix alone. The fact that there's other great fights kind of wrapped around it is even better, and I can't wait to watch it.
Yeah, and also there's no belt on the line, but there is a champion competing, so that
exactly.
gives it something.
For sure.
Yeah, I would say that this card, along with the 3 title fight card we saw earlier this year, are 2 of the quality events that you would want to see more of. I'm hoping that this event is sort of turning a corner for the promotion. This is going to be something where after this, once we get down to that final stretch and once we start building towards New Year's Eve, we get these better cards. There was this sort of weird pause in the schedule this year around the match, and like you said, understandably so, where they just wanted to build the match because it was such a huge deal, and they wanted nothing to be taking the attention away from that. So I completely understand why that happened, but at the same time, it did create this sort of weird pause in the schedule where there was a few months where there really wasn't much to talk about. But now that this is back, I do agree with you that this is a Saitama Super Arena quality card. And, my hope is that the few shows that we get in the months afterward that are the numbered cards, not talking about the Trigger or the landmark shows, they are of this quality and that we can get, good matchups made in the other divisions while the stuff is being played out at super atomweight and so on. So, that's everything I have to say about RIZIN 37. I have a few quick topics to touch on before we get out of here. The JMMA Monday column usually has a part of it called the International Report, where I like to talk about a lot of the notable JMMA names which are making their mark around the globe. And we had a real big moment this weekend for a very big RIZIN alum, and that's Tofiq Musayev, who really made a name for himself in his Bellator debut, beating Sydney Outlaw in just 27 seconds. Did you catch this match? And if so, what did you think about it?
I caught this match. I think it's generous calling it a match. I mean, it lasted 20 seconds, and Musayev blasted the doors of Sydney Outlaw. I mean, we interacted on Twitter a few days ago, right? Like, I can't believe that Bellator initially planned for Tofiq to fight on the prelims of one of their Hawaii cards and to fight Zach Zane, which is ludicrous, right? Like, he's just come in and knocked out one of your best guys, a guy you had lined up to fight for the title on this card, right? Like, he was supposed to fight Patricky on this card, was Sydney Outlaw, and Tofiq just came in and destroyed him. I mean, it was less than 30 seconds, right? It was a total destruction of Sydney Outlaw. And again, I don't know if this is a hot take, because I know Alexander Shabili and Usman Nurmagomedov exist, but Tofiq might be the best 155er in Bellator already. Like, it's insane to me, and I'm so happy that he's in Bellator and that he's in front of a large audience who can see just how good this guy is, because we've seen it firsthand, right? Satoshi submitted him. Satoshi did what he did, but I mean, Tofiq is really, really good. He's a devastating striker. I'm so happy that he's in Bellator, and I think he's next for the title, right? Like, Patricky wants it. Why wouldn't you want to rematch the guy who beat you? Yeah.
I thought it was
so hyped.
I thought it was weird. And I don't know the politics and the background of this, but I thought it was weird that Outlaw was even in this fight, because if I were next for a title fight, I would want to possibly just, if that title fight gets canceled after it was scheduled for a show, I would just try to say, okay, well, I'm just going to wait until the champion's healthy and I can just face him at a later date. But instead, he was put in this fight where he had to face Tofiq Musayev and basically defend his number one contender status in the fight. So
it's really weird.
From Outlaw's perspective, it was a really tough position. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's fine. It reminds me of, like, do you remember when Frankie Edgar fought Brian Ortega, when he was that fight was supposed to be him and Holloway for the belt, and he fought Ortega and then he got knocked out in the first round. And it happened recently with Joanne Calderwood or Joanne Wood and
right,
who was it? Oh, it was Jennifer Meyer. Yeah, it's a really tricky situation. I mean, if I knew I had the champion next and then the champion pulled out and I had to fight another person, I personally wouldn't. But I mean, again, I'm not a fighter. I'm just a dude behind a microphone. Sydney Outlaw took a risk. He got blasted, and he's no longer the next guy in line, in my opinion.
And this was interesting because for Musayev, I really didn't know what to expect, because we hadn't really seen a quality outing from him since 2019. There's a fair amount of excuses you could make for his 2021 fight in RIZIN against Souza. For one, he was facing Souza, but also he was coming in from a quarantine. There were all these things associated with that fight, which would understandably make it a less quality performance than you would expect from him. Sure. So just after all these years, I didn't know what type of performance we were going to get from Musayev, and we ended up getting one which really actually shocked me. Like, I didn't think he was going to just put away someone so quickly. And I knew that he had that explosive power. I knew that he's finished people in the past, but something about this matchup just sort of still surprised me.
Yeah, I mean, if I'm Zach Zane, I'm counting my lucky stars that I didn't have to fight Tofiq Musayev, because I think Tofiq Musayev might have killed a man that night.
Yeah, truly. Definitely. So overall, it's going to be interesting. There's that story. There's a storyline already there, since Musayev has fought Pitbull in the past, and this is, even though Pitbull was the champion, this is almost a chance for him to get something back. So I think that Bellator has a really great matchup on their hands here, and one that they can really do some storytelling with if they want to. A very main event worthy matchup, one that could probably deliver fight wise, something that their main event this week did not do.
Also, if Tofiq wins against Patricky, we might genuinely see a trilogy with not a trilogy, sorry. We might genuinely see him fight Satoshi again.
Oh, you think that would happen?
Potentially. I mean, it would be Bellator versus RIZIN, both belts on the line. I wouldn't be surprised.
we probably wouldn't be able to find out anything about this right now because it's still July, but I would personally be interested just to see, what is the future plans for the partnership between Bellator and RIZIN. After Bellator went to Japan in 2019, I think the general idea was that they wanted to do it again. They did a show at Saitama Super Arena on December 29th, and then on the 31st, they lended a few more of their talents to RIZIN for their New Year's Eve show. And I think generally they liked that partnership and wanted to do it again. Obviously, the pandemic got in the way of that for numerous years. So heading into this New Year's Eve, I'm curious, are they going to try to do that show in Japan again? And if so, would this be something they would want to do in the future? I mean, obviously, the stars can't align that perfectly. Like, if because we're sort of booking, a bit ahead now, assuming that Musayev were to become champion, assuming he were to become champion and be healthy by December. But, if there is going to be a partnership between Bellator and RIZIN, I'd be interested, where is it going to be? Whose belt is going to be on the line, things like that,
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've already told myself that Satoshi's going to be fighting in Bellator in December. Like in my head, that's definitely happening. So anything other than that would be really disappointing.
And you would want to see that show in Japan from Bellator again, right?
100%. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I mean,
I thought that
the crux of this kind of Bellator and RIZIN partnership. I mean, in 2022, it can't just be Spike Carlisle, right? Like, there's got to be something else. So, yeah, be interesting to see for sure.
Yeah, and I thought that when they did that double header of events in 2019, it was like both shows were really strong lineups, and overall it provided one of the greater, not to sound like too dramatic about things, but I think that double header was one of the greater events of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%
just in the entire sport. Yeah. So yeah, I'd be interested to see if that happens. And like you said, I bet they would love that opportunity to do that matchup again, if they have the opportunity to do that. And I'm just curious when this matchup is going to happen with Musayev and Patricky. Musayev is presumably healthy after competing for 27 seconds. And
yeah,
I think the deal with Patricky was that he's already feeling better. It's just he couldn't compete this weekend.
Yeah, I think he tweeted something about October or November, maybe, which would ruin our plans for December.
Right.
So
let's
not discuss that at all. We're gonna just zero in on December. This is how it's gonna be. It's gonna be December. It's gonna be New Year's. It's gonna be Satoshi and Musayev, both belts on the line. Give it to me.
Yeah, and just one quick story before we get out of here. Last night, Teruto Ishihara picked up a win on the ex-MMA card, beating Weston Wilson. Yeah, so he's picked up 2 wins this year and gotten out of this really disastrous run that he had from 2018 to 2021, where he took, let me count here, looks like he took 5 losses and then a draw. This was one of those things where I was tracking this run, this losing streak out of interest, because he was appearing on these shows that I could just catch in the middle of the day, these Fury FC shows, which are always on at convenient times on Sundays for some reason. And I was, when I see a run like this, I just think, oh, you're never going to get out of this, because this is just, they're throwing anyone your way and somehow you're still losing. But it seems like he's, finally gotten control of things. He beat Jose Fernandez in May, and that was a 4-4 fighter, so that's a fight you would expect him to win. But now he beat a 13-6 fighter, so maybe he's turning things around. And I don't know what's in the future for him, but if he can put together a few fights, he's a marketable guy. He's former UFC talent. People know him in Japan. He's fought in numerous Shuto cards. I wouldn't be surprised if this is someone who, once he gets the ball rolling a little more, can be seen on a notable card in the future.
Yeah, 100%. I was so happy to see him win again. Like you said, back-to-back wins now. He's so much fun to watch, win or lose. I'd love to see him back in Japan. Like it seems like he'd be great anywhere. Like I'd like to see him in RIZIN. And you mentioned his UFC run. As bad as that run became, I mean, he did fight some pretty tough dudes. I mean, he
Absolutely,
fought Yan, he fought Kyung Ho Kang, who I think is pretty damn good. I think he fought Gray Maynard as well, right? And lost to Gray Maynard, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's so much fun, man. He's one of those dudes where, yes, it's sad if he's on a massive skid, but you just know when you tune in, win or lose, it's going to be fun, and it's great to see him now winning in those fun fights and not just kind of being the B side, if you get what I mean. Yeah,
and
he's awesome.
You know, if I could be a fly on the wall at Team Alpha Male, I'd be really interested to know, you know, just what changed, because it seems like something changed.
Yeah.
And you know, he's one of those guys where he's still, I feel like he still has work to do before he can be considered for something like, you know, bringing him into RIZIN or bringing him into something like that. But you know, he's someone to look out for. You know, keep a tab on his Tapology page or something like that and see when he's fighting next, because I feel like if he can turn things around, he's one to watch.
For sure, man. 100%.
Well, that wraps up all we have to discuss today. Before we get going, Christopher, thank you for being on the pod. If you have any plugs you want to get out of the way, please do it now.
Yeah, firstly, man, thank you for having me on. Kind of my MMA podcast and debut, so thank you for the opportunity. Not much to plug. I run Aguiar MMA. It's I mean, Jack kind of gave me an awesome intro, so I guess I kind of do what he said. I like to look at MMA through like a really positive lens. I'm not really into clickbaity stuff, and I don't like shitting on fighters. I'm really interested in the history of the sport. Love Japanese MMA, love UK MMA, and on my website, that's pretty much all I talk about, right? It's great fights, it's honoring the history of the sport, looking back at the giants of the sport and the legends of the sport. And yeah, I do fight breakdowns as well, predictions for big cards. I'll probably do a prediction piece for this RIZIN card as well. So yeah, check it out. aguiarmma.com, at aguiarmma on Twitter. Don't get angry at my predictions, please.
Well, yeah, that wraps things up, everyone. Thank you for listening. If you want to get the latest Knockdown News updates, make sure to check knockdownnews.com or follow the Twitter also at Knockdown News. And you know, make sure to tune in next week for the JMMA audio, which will be talking about RIZIN 37 after it's happened. But until then, take care and we'll see you soon.